Tonight on Reel to Reel, we'll have the Pope in Canada and religion in politics.
We'll visit a group of young storytellers from New Jersey.
Rosemary Bruno will fill us in on current events.
And we'll discover who watches religious programming and why. Hello, I'm Father Dave McGowan.
And I'm Isabel Garvey-LaGrosse. Welcome to Reel to Reel.
Before TV and radio and even the printing press, stories were the major source of entertainment, education, and also the preservation of history as tales and memories were passed from generation to generation. But with the rise of the mass media, the art of storytelling has faded.
One group that's keeping the art of storytelling alive is the National Story League. And in our youth profile tonight, we'll meet a group of 5th through 8th graders from St. Raphael's in Trenton, who are the League's first Garden State charter members.
A long, long time ago, the world was filled with rainbows, and everybody was happy. But there were 6 greedy trolls that used to like to take straws, stick them in the...
The Garden State Junior Story Spinners really got started through the Garden State Storytellers, which is the adult group. Usually when I would have a story to tell at the meeting, I would practice it on my children. And then the children just loved this, and then they showed an interest in starting a league of their own. So last year I started a league with the children, which is a junior league. And as the adult group was the first in New Jersey, so our junior league is a first also.
Well, I decided to join the Junior Storytellers League because I heard my teacher tell stories, and I was fascinated by the way she told them and how well she told them, and I decided that I wanted to tell them that well also.
So he decided to stop by the roadside, march there, and spend the night there.
I love telling stories to the younger children because their face lights up in an exciting or a humorous mood at a humorous point in the story, and it just makes me feel very good inside.
The storyteller has the art of storytelling that she can kind of tell to the world. And in that, she can kind of cheer those that need cheering, bring joy to children, and also tell stories to those who have a heart that will never grow old.
Good afternoon. The group you see in front of you is the Garden State Junior Story Spinners, and we would like to entertain you with our repertoire of stories.
Well, telling stories to the older people, it gives me a sense that I can do something that will make other people happy. And the older people show a sense of deep concentration when you're telling the story, like they want to find out the lesson and the moral of the story, and it makes me feel good that they show this concentration when you're telling a story.
The purpose of the storytelling is to share storytelling with others. Our motto is service through storytelling. And we go to nursing homes, to younger children, senior citizen groups, and wherever we're invited.
At the monthly meeting of the Story Spinners, Sister Dorothy feels that it's important to emphasize the principles of storytelling.
Our storytelling meeting is held the first Monday of every month. We begin immediately after school, and we carry on to 4:30. Okay. Who can give me the third one? I think the value principle will carry on, because when we select a story, even though it's a fun story, many times we discuss what lessons are learned in that story. And I think many lessons that will be carried into the future are being told in story form. And I bring out to them that Jesus was the greatest storyteller that ever lived.
From this experience of being with the Junior Story Spinners group, I feel that I can know my stories, and then it would always help me later to become a good writer, to write stories, and to always practice, give me a challenge to think of other stories to make up.
Thing that I find the hardest to teach them is to slow down when they're telling the story and to be loud. Our children do not like to talk loud, but to slow down, they're inclined to go quickly, and I think a lot of that is due to nervousness.
Before I tell a story, or right when I am telling a story, I will feel a little bit nervous, but as soon as I get into my story, I will get into a groove and I will feel a lot better with it.
The storyteller's good feelings aren't confined to them alone. They share their joy with their audiences.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Give us eyes to see the beauty in life. Give us ears to hear its melody. Give us hearts to understand and interpret life for others. Teach us to choose our stories so wisely and to tell them so well, that the story will be remembered long after the storyteller is forgotten. Amen.
Trolls were so greedy, when they were almost done, the rainbow finally hung up in the sky. And now it's very cautious, and it only comes back when we have sun showers.
If you'd like to add that special touch to your classroom or meeting, these young people are available. Contact us here at Reel to Reel and we'll put you in touch with Sister Dorothy. But right now, Rosemary Bruno will put us in the know.
Thank you, Belle, and good evening. United States bishops and church historians will meet in Baltimore this week to discuss and clarify the future of the Catholic Church. The meeting is the centenary celebration of the Third Plenary Council. The council, which is 100 years old this year, helped to shape the policies and development of the Church in the United States today. Topics to be discussed by the U.S. bishops and historians will include missions, parishes, and schools. Baltimore's St. Mary's Seminary and University will host the three-day dialogue, which will end with a liturgy at the Basilica of the Assumption. In other national news, actress Helen Hayes has written a comprehensive source book for older Americans and those who share their lives. Ms. Hayes, an honorary member of the Catholic Golden Age Board of Directors, expects her book to be published next year. The book, entitled Our Best Years, is Ms. Hayes' fifth publication. The new book contains helpful hints on health, retirement, volunteer work, and subjects ranging from gracious living to second careers. Locally, it was an exciting day in Norristown this past Sunday when Mother Teresa of Calcutta was on hand for the opening of a new convent for her missionary Sisters of Charity. Mother Teresa addressed a standing room-only crowd at St. Patrick's Church in Norristown with her simple message of love.
Then you will know how Jesus loves you now, how he loves you, and how he wants you to love one another as he loves you.
Mother Teresa later joined Philadelphia's John Cardinal Kroll for a press conference in which she challenged Americans not to be afraid to love until it hurts. Reel to Reel had the opportunity to meet with the 1979 Nobel laureate. Her interview will air in a special feature this month. And finally, the 1984 Campaign for Human Development will officially open its campaign on Sunday, November 11th at area masses. The Campaign for Human Development is the United States Catholic Church's education action program, started in 1970 to combat domestic poverty. It is the largest national funding program for self-help projects of poor and low-income groups aimed at social change. In the last 14 years, CHD has assisted over 2,000 self-help projects in 175 dioceses. The campaign drive will end on Sunday, November 18th, 1984. For In the Know, I'm Rosemary Bruno. Do have a good evening.
Don't go away. Coming up, we're going to join the Pope on his recent visit to Canada. Pope John Paul II has blazed trails where no pope has ever gone before, and recently he followed the path of missionaries who blazed trails of their own in Canada. We're going to join him as he visits a 17th century reconstruction of a Jesuit missionary settlement known as Ste. Marie.
When the 1984 papal visit to Canada was announced, John Paul II was asked what the occasion was for going to Canada. The pontiff replied, "I'm going to the people. Canada is enough of an event for me." And so Pope John Paul II came to his people. His historic visit that stretched from Newfoundland to Vancouver included a pilgrimage to Ste. Marie among the Hurons, a reconstructed Jesuit village in a land called Huronia, a region of Ontario on Georgian Bay. He came to experience the 17th century life of the Jesuit fathers who lived and died here, and he paid homage to two Jesuit saints whose remains lie within the grounds of Ste. Marie. On the day of his visit, the Pope was escorted by Bill Birick, coordinator of programs at Ste. Marie.
Ste. Marie was a French Jesuit mission community that was established in 1639 to be the headquarters of the Jesuit Christianizing movement in this region to the Huron people, the Wendat people as they called themselves. The Jesuits established Ste. Marie in 1639 to be the central headquarters for a number of missions in the outlying areas. There's approximately 12 villages surrounding Ste. Marie, and each one had a small mission community. Ste. Marie was designed to be the headquarters of that mission movement. It was also designed to be an example of a Christian community.
A traditional rivalry between the Huron Indians and the Iroquois reached a crisis in 1640. The Iroquois were anxious to eliminate their rivals in the fur trade. Attacks on Wendat trading expeditions became frequent. In 1648, Father Antoine Daniel was killed in an attack on a local village. A year later, Father Jean de Brebeuf and Gabriel Lallemont were tortured and killed as well. The remaining Jesuits in Wendat decided to leave Ste. Marie among the Hurons. They set fire to the mission village and went to Christian Village. In the mid-1960s, the mission was restored and opened as a tourist attraction. Today, Ste. Marie staffs actors who relive the daily activities of the Jesuits and lay people who kept the mission alive.
The key to working here is the humanness of it. It's one thing to say that we have a wonderful reconstruction, which I think we do, but the real emphasis of the program and the core of the program is the interpretive staff, the people that are communicating that information to people, because it's real. And we're communicating the history of real people by real people.
What do I do? Oh, I'm the carpenter here. I'm portraying a man by the name of Charles Boivin. He's the master builder here. So you see all these buildings, or some of your shots you'll have here are the buildings that he would have designed and built here.
I'm representing Eustache Lambert. He was the farmer here, and his main responsibilities were those of a farmer. He took care of the animals, feeding the animals, or helping give birth to young cows and calves here, as well as pigs, chickens. Apparently they did have oxen here as well. We have 2 cows. We have a flock of chickens known as Hurons chickens. They're a bird from the northern part of France, and we have 2 pigs.
It's a combination of 2 cultures. You might even see this as a right example right here. You see European-style clothes that came from Europe, the doublet, very typical European fashion, French fashion. But as well as you see some, you might see some native articles, like say, for instance, the moccasins. The Jesuits and the French changed the moccasins, very much adaptable to this land. You know, items like this. What is that? A leather belt, just a pouch for carrying things. If Charles Brovin probably be carrying nails to put on the shingled roofs here. You know, a knife here, the iron products here that you see here, the natives had. So in many ways we shared things.
It's history brought to life. It's not only the reconstruction of the buildings here, which are all in the original spot, but it's also the recreation of the lifestyle lived here by the first Frenchmen to Ontario.
We're incredibly excited about the Pope coming to St. Marie, as you can imagine. It's really significant, and it's significant for a number of reasons. Historically, in 1644, the Pope at the time declared something that was called a plenary indulgence for people that were coming, for anyone making the pilgrimage to St. Marie among the Hurons. Plenary indulgence basically meant that if they came to St. Marie, they would have a very good opportunity of cleansing their sins. Not that everyone would have their sins cleansed, but they would have a very good opportunity to have that done, because they were making this sacrifice, this pilgrimage. And now, in 1984, the Pope himself is making that pilgrimage back here, and I think that's very, very significant. It's also the location of the only 2 known graves of North American martyrs, of the 8 North American martyrs. So that's significant in itself, and he's coming here for that reason.
Let us recall for a moment these heroic saints who are honored in this place and who have left us a precious heritage. 6 of them were Jesuits, priests from France: Jean de Brébeuf, Isaac Job, Gabriel Lallemand, Antoine Daniel, Charles Garnier, and Noël Chabanel. Fired with love for Christ and inspired by Saint Ignatius of Loyola, Saint Francis Xavier, and other great saints of the Society of Jesus, these priests came to the New World to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ to the native peoples of this land.
Last week, we devoted our entire program to the topic of religion and politics. As a postscript, our next story tonight features another viewpoint from San Francisco.
In San Francisco, an interfaith Hiroshima-Nagasaki peace commemoration is taking place. One of the speakers is Dr. Thomas Ambrogi, Director of Religious Issues, 84.
Represents also an affront to the living memory of every one of those who died in the fires of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The idolatry of military might, and especially the idolatry of nuclear weaponry, must be called just that. Idolatry that can never lead to anything that could be called national interest or national security for anyone.
Whether in public gatherings,
To respond to Mr. Falwell and the moral majority who have co-opted the turf of religious issues,
or with church groups,
don't believe. I'm not saying that they're not to be considered, but when they become single issue, total focused, they're out of proportion. We have to broaden the base of what religious issues are.
or in living rooms around California,
People in the religious community and
Tom Ambrogi has a message for religious people, people of faith.
that if you really feel as strongly as you do from Christian principle that, for instance, the nuclear arms race must be stopped, if you really feel as strongly as you do, as I hear you do, that our involvement in Central America raises serious ethical and religious concerns, then what we're trying to say is you've got to translate that into action in the political process. That you've got to work for a specific candidate, the candidate who will best incarnate your vision of what a more just society will look like.
A doctor of theology and former executive director of the Commission on Social Justice for the Archdiocese of San Francisco, Tom Ambrogi has added his voice to the national debate over religion and politics.
I find a great deal of confusion on the question of the separation of church and state. That time-honored, terribly valuable principle of the separation of the two institutions called state and church must be maintained at all costs. It does not, however, imply at the same time a separation between religion and politics, and that's the confusion. In fact, I find that to be a real affront to the great traditions on which this country was built. Our foremothers and forefathers were acting on strong religious principles in the political arena. We need to continue ethical, moral, religious critique of public policy. We have to bring our own ethical, moral, religious principles to bear on our own political choices. I'm not going to put down somebody who disagrees with me and say there's only one Christian way to vote. That's not the point. But I want to encourage people in the religious community to get involved in the give and take of political dialogue. In other words, to encourage within the religious community taking partisan political stands.
The religious debate in this year's election has been fueled in no small part by the TV evangelists and religious programming.
But who watches religious programming? In our next story, we're going to take a look at a study conducted by a local university which examined this question. You may be surprised by the results.
I do not believe it's good evangelism, and I think the study shows that. I do not believe it essentially converts people, and I think the study shows that.
There are a number of things in the study that are related to the kind of a concept that comes out of television ministry regarding the meaning of religion. Those are things that are going to have to be studied.
We feel that people are looking for a frame of reference, a way of understanding the information in their world.
What these people are talking about, and the reason reporters from around the nation gathered at this Manhattan news conference, was the release of a landmark study of religious television in the United States. The Annenberg School of Communications of the University of Pennsylvania and the Gallup polling organization spent 2 years researching the audience of religious programs under a commission from 40 groups, including the U.S. Catholic Conference, the Christian Broadcasting Network, and UNDA USA. Among the major findings, regular viewers of these programs number about 13.3 million, or 6.2% of people in households with TV. This figure is lower than generally expected. The audience is somewhat older, lower in education and income, and describe themselves as more conservative and fundamentalist than the general TV audience. In program content, the study reveals that social and moral issues are discussed with greater frequency than in general TV, but religious and theological topics are not covered as often. The viewers of religious TV are also the believers, the churchgoers. They view these shows as an expression and confirmation of their beliefs, not as a substitute for them. In line with that, the study found that watching these programs goes hand in hand with attendance at and contributions to the viewer's local church. Questions were raised about the effectiveness of television as a tool for evangelization.
It maintains, it mobilizes, it cultivates, and it energizes and activates, both in terms of contributions, in terms of attendance, in terms of various forms of religious participation.
What should happen is that evangelism obviously should be there, but at the same time, the activation of that audience that is available to us to help them become, in a sense, the evangelists, so that evangelism occurs on the level that really we feel that it should occur, and that is through the life of the individual believer who is, in that sense, a contributor in the framework of the local church.
As to the issue of conversion, our mail tells us that many people's Christian faith is made alive by their experience of viewing religious TV.
Reaction to the study was varied.
I think there is a real dissatisfaction there among the viewers of religious television that apparently turns them to what is in there for their satisfactions rather than the values they perceive coming out of general television.
Those who have been doing other kinds of program formats, such as reel-to-reel, sound and sense, where we're taking the message and putting it into the medium as the medium exists, that those may have a better chance of creating audience than the traditional, quote, religious program.
Thank you for bringing us into your home this evening. And remember, Election Day is only 2 days away.
So exercise your right as a citizen. Get out and vote.
And remember, please send us your comments and suggestions. Reel to Reel, 222 North 17th Street, room 907, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 19103.
And next week on Reel to Reel, we'll travel back to New Jersey to meet some priests in uniform.
Dr. Richard Fitzgibbons returns to talk about trust.
Mike Gallagher, the movie critic, takes a look at Amadeus and the Razor's Edge.
And we'll meet a group that is working for peace, one piece at a time. All this and more next week on Reel to Reel. Good night.
Good night. And remember, Jesus is Lord.